The idea is that while aliens are summoning legendary warriors and such from their real history, we summon people like King Arthur and Achilles from the stories we've all heard, creating an HFY where humans are awesome because of our imaginations. Having returned to my chamber, I collapsed into the sleeping pod and allowed my battered body to relax, shuddering as tense muscles released tension in short spasms. While not physically injured, I had certainly incurred a significant mental strain by taking on a godslayer in the first round. These aliens really went all out. I looked at my hand. Still can't believe the aliens had a godslayer. That stung. Well, enough with the strong language. I was alive, the initial plan to impress the audience had succeeded, so I needed to talk to Mentor, plan for the next match, and get some rest. This was going to be an interesting few months. I walked over to my belongings, brought out the holopad, and dialed for Mentor. She answered promptly, and the holopad projected her into the center of the room as I started picking at the food and liquids left for me. She seemed pretty happy as she said, "You are making big waves on the HoloNet, Orion. Turns out the living legend plan was successful." It was, though it was damn terrifying as well. How would you like an alien creature swinging a god-slaying weapon in your face? I grumbled back, as she just laughed in response. Seriously, if the audience hadn't responded so well to the only alien worlder summoner fighting a summoned legend on his own, that alien worlder, me, would likely have had serious trouble. As it is, my hand aches and I want to sleep. So let's get this over with. I only have 20 hours before the next match, and will need to read the relevant literature. Mentor sighed. You never really had a way with people, did you? Never mind, though. The next opponents are going to be the Silotrol, and from the looks of it, there are 8 of them, and they seem to enjoy summoning monsters. One in particular stands out. It's about a 4-limbed insectoid the size of a small skyscraper. It went pretty much untouched and killed thousands before a lucky asteroid crashed into it and killed it. Fairly sure if we can get something to come from space for our next summon, we would have a... What sort of insanity is going on in that head of yours for you to start laughing so hard? I found it challenging to articulate my ideas, as it was such an opportune time to showcase humanity's heroes. Eventually, I calmed down and began to explain. The arenas are open-topped, so something from space isn't impossible. However, the only impression of humans so far is that we are remarkably strong. I have the perfect idea that meets both space and strength criteria, and I can probably execute the summoning effectively, even without literature. Mentor nodded, indicating for me to continue. Have you ever played old shooters from the beginning of the millennium? You mean things like Call of Duty? No, I was thinking more along the lines of Spartan than that. By Spartan, do you literally mean Spartan, as in the chief? I smiled, and Mentor responded with a laugh. The one and only. And with that, we ended our discussions, and I collapsed into bed, falling into a delightful dream of me entering a planet's atmosphere encased in a metal pod, the wind screeching by like a banshee, and then the deafening echo as I crashed into the ground. Oh yes, this next round will definitely cause some jaws to drop. As I woke up, I noticed 18 hours had passed. Realizing that legends truly take a toll, and I was running a little late, I consumed more of the generic provisions available, and I thought to myself, to try and get Mentor to send me a decent steak, or maybe fish and chips. Well, no issue, this was nutritious enough, just a bit generic at times. Well, it was time to prepare for the summoning in a non-conventional manner, at least from the Xeno perspective. I got out of my nightwear and put on the characteristic dark blue of the Royal Earth Navy uniform, making sure that my commander insignia was correctly positioned, since this would matter for who I plan to summon. Most Xenos seem to subjugate their legends through sheer willpower, hence the multiple summoners to enable this. This was not the case for me. I wanted to make my realizations stronger and independent. It was more effective that way, and I chose my old Navy uniform for exactly that reason. With that, I was ready, and signaled to the moderators to have someone take me over to the designated arena. They quickly sent someone over, a triboon if my Xeno knowledge was correct. He led me to a small hoverjet, and we left for the new arena. As he flew me to the arena I was scheduled to match in, he seemed delighted, trying to discuss how humans were strong for first-time competitors, that no one expected a species to face a summoned legend and survive, let alone unharmed. and something about betting credits on me, though his rapid speech made it difficult for my translator to keep up. We reached the arena without incident, and I grinned, knowing the plan had made bigger waves than expected. Xenos love entertainment, perhaps even more so than humans. Though with entities that could kill gods, a 2 kilometers open-topped arena seemed optimistic, until the psychic dampeners and energy shields were noted. I was led to the summoning pedestal, where I was greeted by the opposing team, a weird bunch with 4 arms and 3 legs. At least they had more normal mouths than the Angatal. We exchanged greetings, then took our positions as the announcers asked us to declare our summoned entities. The Silotral said they would summon a giant insect capable of consuming all life, killed only by cosmic intervention. As they finished, they summoned their large, 4-legged beetle. Most would run, but I only stood and grinned, ready for the hero I had in mind. The announcers turned to me, and I was given the transmitter. I don't believe they anticipated me declaring I would fight again. However, I had no intention of becoming a one-trick pony. I raised the device to my lips and spoke. The one I plan to summon is a being from a fictional tale I heard in my youth. It was about a soldier who endured hardship and suffering to become the best humanity could offer. And when some aliens took notice of us, they sought our destruction. So this soldier was sent to war. He was told he would experience hell and more. I heard gasps as the translators conveyed the equivalent. And he was ordered to do many things, the least of which was to drop onto a planet, into a living hell. With one explanation, he was not to jump feet first into hell, but to ensure it was crowded when he arrived. With that I envisioned, I believed, and I summoned. At first the announcers were expectant, and then time passed, and they appeared confused. I believe one asked if I was going to begin, but I knew I could feel him coming from above. A high-pitched scream pierced the arena, and the audience looked up in time to see what they thought was a meteorite. Everyone backed away, leaving me on my pedestal, and I only grinned. Tsunami indeed. With that thought, the meteorite crashed into the ground about 25 meters away, except no meteor had that sort of angular shape or that honed sheen. With the familiar blast of noise I associated with drop pods, the front panel shot off, allowing the man within to leave. Standing close to 2.2 meters tall and weighing half a ton, a green man stood. I strode over, ignoring the dust that had settled on my uniform from the impact. As I approached him, he looked at me and saluted. "Commander, nice to see you." I saluted back. "Chief, you have a new mission. You see that giant alien beetle in the distance?" "Yes, sir." "I want it gone. This is the Galactic stage. We must not mess up. How you do it, I will leave to you. Show them what humanity is made of." "Understood." With that, I turned to the announcers and organizers. I was prepared. The countdown began. As the starting horn sounded, the Master Chief, the demon, sprang into action. The first thing the chief did was run back to the pod and start grabbing necessary weaponry, a handful of grenades and a sniper rifle. He quickly headed back out onto the arena and made for high ground. Meanwhile, the giant beetle, the consumer, according to Silotral, started scraping across the ground, taking strides that shook the very earth. The team of psychics murmured amongst themselves, providing feedback on their observations and coping with the strain. I observed the chief climbing a craggy outcrop and surveying the land. Realizing I couldn't communicate directly, I summoned a small earpiece to listen in on the chief and provide tactical information or orders as needed. After establishing the secure comms link, I asked, "What do you think it would take to kill this bug?" "It looks pretty tough. Doubt I can kill it in a few shots," the chief replied. Cortana, the AI, then interjected, "Its exoskeleton appears sturdy. Conventional tactics won't easily defeat this foe. I don't think anything short of a plasma bombardment or a large MAC cannon round could penetrate that armor." I relayed that the consumer had apparently rampaged for weeks before an asteroid killed it. I had some ideas on how to best this beast, but it depended on the interior structure. After sharing the plan with the chief and Cortana, they initially sounded doubtful, and Cortana mused, "It might work with a few well-placed grenades, but why?" In the distance, I observed the chief tossing and catching a grenade. This was indeed a promising development. With the plan in place, I signaled him to proceed, watching as he descended the outcrop, mines in hand. Meanwhile, the consumer had begun its rampage, ravaging the landscape in its approach. While arena destruction was tolerated, most considered it impolite and a sign of poor control. Mentor and I, however, believed that if an action was not forbidden, it was fair game. The arena was a playground for legends, and all playgrounds eventually see abuse. Within minutes, the chief had positioned himself in a small plane, burying landmines. The first stage was to cripple the consumer's leg, granting easier access to what we presume was its face, a gaping maw lined with crushing teeth, akin to giant molars. The challenge now was to draw the consumer's attention, lure it to the intended area, and damage its leg. The simplest method was to provoke the beast. The Silotrol struggled to control the consumer's undeniably primitive nature, so angering it would exacerbate that strain, leading to errors in the Silotrol's favor. This is where the sniper rifle proved useful. While unable to significantly harm the chitinous exoskeleton, the supersonic rounds could still wound the creature, as a 14.5mm lead projectile hurts regardless of the target. The blue blood, a sign of copper-based circulation, confirmed the consumer's agitation and partial blindness. The summoners, relying on the senses of their summoned creation, now found themselves under attack and blinded, a scenario not part of their plan, given the legends of tribes failing to even scratch the consumer. Blind, furious, and raging, the consumer quickly charged at the chief, who had positioned himself across the minefield. All according to plan, I thought to myself. Some of these Xenos believed that size and might were unbeatable, but the bigger they are, the harder they fall, as the consumer discovered, with the ground under one of its legs exploding in a mass of dirt and shrapnel. It collapsed to the ground, letting loose a truly bone-chilling scream. I glanced over at the crowd, seeing signs of distress, and I'm fairly certain some of them were now sat in a pile of their own excrement. Probably not a pleasant sight or smell, but definitely satisfying. As the massive beetle collapsed, the chief started to sprint up what remained of its leg. I could practically hear the announcers screaming about how all humans were insane, not even fazed by events that could cause genetic nightmares for other species. Well, the species that did have genetic memory weren't particularly intelligent, so it wasn't a big deal. As the chief neared that gaping maw, he prepped a grenade and threw it down into the belly of the beast, assuming it had a belly. I mean, looking at the size of it, it probably had the heart the size of a landing craft, a heart that would hopefully be delivered 10 of its daily pieces of shrapnel in a few short seconds. Well, those few short seconds passed, and I felt the blast as a tremor under the chief's feet. But the bug was closer to cockroach than beetle. Fucking xenotenacity, never quite what you expect. With that, the chief said to me, "Change of plan. Can I give our guest a surprise?" Giving a quick confirmation, I was fairly surprised when he jumped into the maw, the sound of metal on enamel echoing through the arena. If I was surprised, then the Xenos looked at me, wondering if I had ordered my champion to die, thinking the match had ended. As the judges approached to announce the Silotrol's victory, the consumer let out yet another horrific cry, a death scream. With a mighty crash and a cloud of dust, the consumer then collapsed onto the arena floor, its limbs slowly twitching before the movement ceased entirely. Emerging from the maw, covered in blue and green, was the chief. Indicating my need for an audio transmitter, I hurried over to the chief, sensing his grin from a kilometer away. Holding the device, I heard the aliens question why I had allowed my warrior to enter such a brutal battle. Looking at the chief, I could feel his witty response. Extending the transmitter, the entire galaxy heard the chief proudly, with a hint of humor, declare, "I thought I would shoot my way out. You know, mix things up a bit." The Mind Games, a prestigious competition witnessed by billions, if not trillions, of sapients across the galaxy, allowed spacefaring species to demonstrate the capabilities of their psychic summoners and showcase their unique cultures. As a new entrant, humans sought to quickly gather prestige and make our strength known to any potential enemies. I made a note of this potential opening paragraph for a future section of my memoirs, then fell back onto my bed with a sigh, weary from the day's events. After winning the second round, I had been ushered into the interview chamber, where two excited tribune interviewers asked about my tactics and the rising stars of the Mind Games, the humans. Though tired, I was here to represent humanity, and I did not want to disappoint. The first interviewer, Ucell, was the more dominant one, with Utok interjecting with his thoughts now and then. First, how do you feel after that recent match? Surely pitting your legend against a formidable foe was a taxing endeavor? Asked Ucell, with Utok quickly adding, It was pretty awesome, though. I looked at them for a moment, then decided to be forthright. This was bound to surprise them as I began speaking with a grin. It wasn't my idea. It was his. What? You mean you didn't control this? Your chief? You allowed him free will? I shrugged. Yes, why? Is that unusual? Of course I knew it was, but I feigned ignorance, finding it more entertaining this way. Yes, it's not normal. That's why everyone uses teams, Utok exclaimed. You have to carefully manage the legends, or the battle plans you make could be undone when the summoned acts as they normally would. How did you control him then? Gesturing to my uniform, I simply replied, I pulled rank. Pulled rank? My translator struggles with that phrase. Of course, in his legend, he is depicted as a soldier, a lone individual, facing off against aliens with advanced technology and a sentient parasite that consumes all sentient life. I observed the pair's hesitation as I spoke. Some Xenos seem to struggle with the notion that humans require formidable adversaries to pose a true challenge. I deliberately omitted mentioning that he was genetically and surgically superior, or that he wore armor most humans could not. After all, I was not here to convey the facts, but to weave a tale. Just a regular soldier? Utok asked nervously, his earlier enthusiasm now subdued. Evidently, dealing with the eccentricities of humans was a bit much for him. Yes, merely a soldier, not the offspring of a deity or blessed from birth, I responded smoothly. I was not lying, merely failing to disclose the whole truth. Snorting, Ucell, in an attempt to conclude the interview, inquired, Final question. Why do you choose to field only one member on your team? Is it due to a scarcity of human summoners, or is there something more to it? With that, I was permitted to depart. Well, depart since I had to wade through a crowd of my recently acquired admirers. Can you sign my carapace? What are your thoughts on the competitors? Would you like to hang out with my friends? It could be so much fun. Dealing with such questions, I began socializing and partying with the fans, repeatedly signing their carapaces, and when I left, told them they could look forward to the future, as I was enjoying myself as much as they were watching me. After finally navigating the crowds and flying back to my private habitat, I noticed I had been awake for nearly 20 hours. The journey to and from the arena, as well as the time spent with the fans after the interview, must have taken longer than expected. Now, I lie on the bed watching the final matches of the competition. The format has shifted from a straightforward 1v1 duel to a greater variety of match types, such as larger army skirmishes, objective games, and unusual tests of physical and psychic capabilities. Mentor will have to worry about that for the time being. I simply need to rest. Summonings are tiring for everyone, especially for me as a human who required augmentation to be strong enough. I suppose I appreciate those who adhere to a schedule, though I can't say it's the worst thing that could have happened. As for the fans, I'll admit to being cautious, though it does help us gain renown. Still, I worry that chemistry doesn't change no matter where you are in the universe, and while our Death Worlder status makes us tougher than most, that doesn't mean someone can't slip something suspicious into your drinks. She had a valid point, she continued, and we can't have you being useless when the next match comes around. Fortunately, what was supposed to be held tomorrow has defaulted as our win due to the extensive doping by our opponents. As such, the next round for us won't start until a week and a half from now. In that case, I want you to head over to the usual facility for a checkup. With all the realizations you've been making, we want to monitor your progress. Ugh, this day just keeps getting better. Reluctantly, I agree and make my way to the spaceport. Knowing Mentor, a ship should already be ready. Navigating the bustling spaceport crowds isn't easy, what with humans being shorter than other species due to our planet's larger gravity. Yet finding the ship Mentor had arranged wasn't too difficult. I just had to keep an ear out for the distinctive sounds of the 1812 overture. As I rounded the corridor, the crowd had parted, and there he was, my good old friend and fellow summoner, Kieran. He saw me and waved me over, silencing Tchaikovsky's work. "It's been a while, Kieran," I said with a grin. "At least 8 months, Orion. I heard you've been making quite a name for yourself on the HoloNet. Have you been up to no good again?" he replied with a slight chuckle. "You should know that there have been no shenanigans beyond what Mentor has told me to do." "Mentor? Yeah, she sent me to get you, said you were going to have a checkup. Tough break, but at least it's not me. I had one 6 months ago, and I still failed to meet the growth criteria, so I got another round of treatment." I winced. "Again?" This conversation continued the entire journey to human space, and it was still unresolved when we arrived. As I went to leave the ship, I left one last comment. The Zerg are like Orcs. They just have huge numbers. Since they are also unified and controlled by the Queen of Blades, they would be able to outmatch the Imperium as a whole. The Space Marines wouldn't stand a chance. I quickly departed his vessel. Though I had not prevailed, I had the final say. A small triumph, at least. And with that, my day once more took a turn for the worse. I was promptly ushered through the admissions area, then seated in a plain gown, electrodes attached, within an oversized MRI scanner. And so the test and examination commenced. A researcher's voice sounded in the room. "Subject 58, named Orion, here for an ability assessment and potential augmentation to reach anticipated parameters. Requested by Dr. Sarah Loiska, beginning." After approximately 40 minutes of navigating the required tasks, with the assigned researcher providing only test details, the process grew tiresome, though I understood the necessity, given my role in humanity's initial defense against a not yet fully comprehended warfare type. When asked to manifest something of my choosing to test physical integrity, I, feeling somewhat bored, considered summoning the Astral Colossus, but ultimately opted for the simpler Celestial Shard, non-sentient and straightforward to evaluate. I heard the researcher quietly murmur, "Thank you," a gesture I appreciated, despite the protocol discouraging interaction during testing. After another hour of assessments, including inquiries about my experiences and dreams, which I infrequently recall, I was finally released and informed of the results. The initial tests had yielded positive outcomes, with exceptional memory performance, and the manifestation proved more robust and precise than anticipated. This was welcome news, as it meant I would not require further serum injections and the accompanying unpleasant hallucinations resulting from alterations to my brain's structure to harness psychic fields. Finally, 6 hours after I had arrived, I was allowed to rest and wait for the next shuttle towards the system where the mind games were being held. So naturally, I read a book and waited. At least the Xenos were willing to party. As he strode onto the stage in front of hundreds of cameras, streamed to billions across the galaxy, who were watching with bated breath, the slight man gave a small cough and then started. "I stand before you today, not as the leader of a proud race, not the head of a strong colony, and not as a member of the government. I stand here today as a man, a lover, and as a father. My son told me today that he was afraid, not of death, as we have been threatened with all his life, nor of suffering or pain, but afraid for those that harm us. He asked me if they would regret what they had done to us, and if they would remember it as the glory as they claim, or as a shame for them. Of course, he did say he was afraid of dying, but his fear of death was less than his concern for our aggressors, for the affect our legacy will have on them. Our opponents outgun us, outnumber us, and are monsters even if we do get close. We are not going to be able to win this battle. We are not going to win this war. We are not going to be able to refer to Earth as our home. What we can do is leave a message in the stars, an echo of humanity that will allow those who, just like we once were, those who gazed up to the stars with wonder in our eyes, a message of struggle, love, hate, and all the things in between. The message will be of how, even in humanity's darkest hour, on the brink of their destruction, we stood firm, not yielding to what is considered an insurmountable force. I believe this with all my being, that this is we cannot win. Perhaps we shall prevail. Perhaps we shall not. But those observing us and not interfering with this genocide must understand one thing, the most vital aspect of humanity. We shall not be forgotten. As the slight man stepped away from the platform, the resounding cheers of every human watching echoed, while their foes fell silent, beginning to comprehend what they had awakened. Sitting there, I felt a shiver run down my spine, goosebumps erupting across my skin. This was precisely what was needed. Only by having a purpose beyond mere survival could humanity thrive, endure, and rout the unstoppable forces threatening the entire race. "Shuttle's about to depart, and you're just lost in your book," they said, irritated as they tried to get my attention. I had nearly forgotten I needed to return to the system hosting the mind games. "Apologies, I tend to become absorbed when reading an engrossing book." She simply looked at me, and I then had to board the shuttle. It was closer to a freighter than a shuttle, which meant the journey would likely take a few days, not the few hours Kieran's modified transport would have required. Consulting my holopad, I calculated the time until the next round's start. 5 days. I would have time, but might want to rest now, as the strategy meeting with Mentor was yet to occur, which could consume several hours. The woman from before approached and showed me to my quarters. "Eat when you're ready," she said, gesturing to the mess sign before leaving. Well, she was a delight. I didn't feel hungry after the testing, so I sought to rest. When I awoke, I would likely spend my time reading the remainder of my book. I was about halfway through, and the story was growing increasingly captivating. The journey itself was rather uneventful. I ate, slept, and read, with little excitement given the company. The woman was the captain, and her crew seemed equally surly. However, the silence did not particularly bother me, as I was free to roam, though the options for exploration on a freighter were limited. And FTL travel felt akin to a lengthy family road trip, with the constant question of, are we there yet? The book I was reading proved to be as engrossing as I had anticipated. It depicted the humans' preparations for a war that echoed across the stars as they faced off against alien beings akin to space octopuses who had no rules for warfare. The humans, forced to abandon the principles they had placed upon themselves, such as anti-nuclear laws, prisoner of war treatment, and civilian protection, became a cornered, desperate animal, willing to take drastic measures, including dropping nuclear weapons capable of splitting small moons into the heart of the enemy fleet. Despite these desperate efforts, the humans were on the defensive, with Earth as the last bastion, as their colonies had been devastated. The Godzilla threshold was the only thing that saved the humans, though at a great cost as Seoul spiraled into a supernova, with the majority of humanity fighting its final stand, only to be vaporized in a defiant "fuck you" to everything within 50 light years. Humanity had left an indelible message across the stars. Do not fight humans. They are desperate, afraid, and willing. Upon my return to the Summoner Center, my first order of business was to review the tournament brackets. I had anticipated the third round of the deathmatch-esque games, but it seemed that, through popular viewer vote and an innovative, refreshing form of entertainment, the format was shifting from a simple "who is stronger" to a more strategic style of battle. This was not necessarily a problem, as some of the other races were capable of summoning formidable, world-rending entities, and I could try to match them, though I felt that the strategic approach might prove more enjoyable. All right, so I'll be facing off against the Kurldon, another Deathworlder species that roughly translates to the smart ones. As expected, they seem quite robust, though the presence of an exoskeleton is concerning. Typically, legends depict monsters that kill or maim, so the tougher the opponent, the more formidable the creatures must be. The arena appears to be a large jungle, offering ample cover to utilize if needed. There also seem to be ruins or buildings scattered throughout, likely part of the objective. The game is called Siege, and I'm the attacking side. Hurrying to my private habitat, I contacted Mentor. "Took you long enough, Orion," she said, preferring punctuality. The checkup and return trip took some time, but now we can discuss the details. Mentor provided more information on the match, explaining that I must either force the defenders to surrender, eliminate their forces, or control their starting base to win. "Dragons," I said. "I believe that's an excellent idea. They will likely attempt to summon some hunters or heroes suited for stealthy jungle combat. A dragon burning down the jungle would give us an advantage. Plus, they're as tough as nails, so it'll be hard to lose our forces, and if I choose the right properties, they should be relatively easy to control without causing me any undue distress. I see, my mentor replied. I simply thought you preferred humanoid forces, since they require less control. I feel a bit more confident about this plan, I continued. Dragons can be a straightforward point-and-kill solution, and the spectacle would be quite thrilling. I began to distort my voice, mimicking an excited exclamation. What was that? It seemed unstoppable. Adopting an overly enthusiastic tone, I responded, Oh, that was a monster we dispatched with swords, for money, glory, and because we could. My mentor's usual reaction was a slight frown, followed by a nod. Very well, you may use the dragons and alter the battlefield, but remember there are different paths to victory. With that, the call ended, and I tucked away my holopad before leaving to find a porter to take me to the arena in time. I glanced over, and the Curled Dawn were larger than anticipated, since their team of 16 had summoned an equal number of warriors, clad in a mix of pelts and advanced sci-fi tech. It was clear they were relying on these enhanced fighters to gain an advantage. This also meant divine weapons were less likely, suggesting dragons could be a great choice. I closed my eyes and first altered my attire to thick leather, suitable for riding dragons. If I was going to do this, I wanted to do it with style and for the cool points. Next, I focused on summoning the dragons. I decided to summon just one, not wanting to risk losing before we even began. I envisioned an intelligent, subordinate dragon with scales tougher than diamonds, a searing breath, and claws capable of tearing tanks apart. The best colors of blood, red and midnight black, were essential. With the dragon formed in my mind, I projected it into reality. It flew in and landed beside me in a shower of mud, rock, and splintered wood. I saw the Curldan flinch from the small missiles, which I found satisfying as I mounted the dragon, settling near the back of its head. Realizing I needed a saddle, I decided to wedge my feet into small-scale gaps instead. Leaning forward, I whispered to the dragon, "Burn what you want and eat your fill," while also exerting some control over it. As I felt the familiar tingle of overexertion, I was glad I had chosen one dragon and not a horde. I waved to the judging body, ready, as were my opponents. After being directed to our starting positions, I only had to wait for the klaxon. 10 minutes pass, and the dragon has already started to burn a small shrubbery that had encroached into our clearing. The dragon, it turns out, is not a name, so I inquire. The dragon replies in a gravelly voice that seemed to shake the earth. In my mind, I am Empyrean Drake. That was when the klaxon sounded. Empyrean Drake, I am Orion. Let us demonstrate to our enemies who the terror of the skies is. Empyrean Drake responded with a mighty roar, no doubt causing all the viewers across the galaxy to tremble, and would have sent flocks of birds fleeing had any remained after hearing him approach. He unfurled his wings and rose into the air with a gust that threatened to snap nearby trees. Despite humanity's space exploration and FTL travel achievements, there was something exhilaratingly primal about soaring through the sky of a planet, the air rushing past. Dragons were a wise choice, if only for this experience. As the klaxon sounded, Empyrean Drake and I took to the sky, circling to survey the lay of the land. The objective was clear. A large modern complex stood out amongst the overgrown ruins within the jungle. The issue was how to capture the facility. From the mission briefing, I must hold the command suite for 20 minutes to secure a conventional victory, or force the enemy team to surrender or be eliminated. They were likely entrenched in and around the complex, and I was not permitted to completely destroy the buildings. However, if these alien ruins resembled old Incan or Aztec structures, there could be hidden passageways and tunnels running beneath the jungle. I glance at Empyrean Drake. Regardless of whether such tunnels exist, they would not be suitable. As I ponder this, Empyrean Drake speaks in his gravelly voice, tinged with something akin to anger. These rules are tedious. Why not simply burn the vegetation and roast them in their metal home? Dragons were a good choice. Lancer's gaze lifted skyward, where a beast of large proportions soared, with a smaller entity perched upon its neck. The whiny yet compelling voice in his head informed him that this was the enemy, and he should continue observing their movements and reporting so that weaknesses and strategies could be formed. Another voice added that the smaller entity, a human, seemed arrogant for having only one troop. Lancer cared not for the reasons or beliefs of the voices. He simply followed their orders, an overwhelming compulsion to do so, adding only to his intense loyalty. However, despite being one of the Empire's most elite soldiers, even he felt a sense of surprise when the large beast began spewing fire that caused the living wood to burn, the vegetation to shrivel, and to char even the ground and stone underneath. His mission remained unchanged, however. He would continue observing, and he would report any actions taken by the enemy. To carry out this action, he drew his weapon and continued to gaze up into the sky through the targeting scope. This was fantastic. The flames the Empyrean Drake produced were absolutely astounding, and I doubt any standard military flamethrower could have the same results. The jungle was most definitely burning, and the ruins of old were emerging from the overgrowth charred black. As we continued burning the foliage around the complex, a sudden glint caught my eye. Looking down to the right, straining to make anything out against the dense green foliage. There, nestled atop a ruin, pointing what looked like an abomination of metal piping at us, was a black suit with an orange and blue pelt atop him. Empyrean Drake, want to find out a roasted beetle tastes like? Your jokes fail to amuse me, human. But I am looking forward to have something to hunt. With that, we started our descent onto the first victim of this round. Lancer had fought many things, but even he would admit that having a large, scaly, fire-breathing monster made him instinctively afraid, though those emotions were quickly quelled by the voices compelling him to fire at the monster, despite his desire to seek cover and regroup first. Lancer steadied his spike rifle as the beast flew towards him, unleashing a volley of large metal spikes that could pin a Kruldan to a wall. The beast, which the voices had begun to call a dragon, did not attempt to evade the spikes, allowing them to bounce off its scales or miss as it accounted for their evasion. In response, the creature opened its mighty jaws and let out a roar. Lancer quickly sought cover, momentarily freed from the compulsions of the voices in his head. Expecting a torrent of flames, he was surprised when nothing came. Yet just as he thought himself safe, his cover was torn apart by huge claws, rending the old stone structure and piercing his carapace before he was lifted into the sky. Though his body cried out in pain, the calming influence of the compelling voice allowed Lancer to observe the beast up close. Its large claws, scales that easily stopped the spike drivers, and the roaring gout of flames made it a fearsome weapon. But what truly frightened Lancer was when he looked into the creature's golden eyes and saw its sentience, its grinning maw filled with fearsome teeth. He aimed and fired. However, the dragon reared its head, seemingly knocking the human from its perch, sending it tumbling down into the canopy below as the dragon dove after it. The spikes had barely missed the human. Defender briefly considered a form of precognition before the voice ordered him forward to hunt down the weak-looking one. I was slightly confused as to what was happening. First, I had been slightly shocked by Empyrean Drake's violent consumption of the first enemy and had said, "You're a monster." Apparently, this did not go down well with him. He quickly turned his head and said, "You are the monster, trying to force a dragon to obey your whims, to fight the fight of humans. You are despicable, arrogant, and weak. You will die." He then lashed out, attempting to bite me from where I was trying to keep balance on the back of his neck. At least that was what I would have thought had I not been overcome by panic at the sight of the unstoppable Empyrean Drake descending upon me. I fled hastily through the foliage, the roar of fire at my back, and the snapping of shattered wood as the Drake gave chase, causing me to completely forget about winning the game. As I ran, I encountered an oversized beetle wielding a gun, and without hesitation I barreled through him, grabbing a few spikes that had fallen from his ammunition pack. I had no time to retrieve the weapon, for the Empyrean Drake had turned its attention to the fallen Kruldan warrior, allowing me to continue my escape. After running for approximately 15 minutes, the sounds of pursuit faded, and I sought refuge in an old ruin, contemplating my next move. I could either try to win the game now, hoping the Drake would eliminate some of the other warriors first, or I could confront the Drake and then attempt to claim victory on my own. However, both options presented significant challenges as I lacked the necessary weapons, armor, and tools.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.